You're my priority, Charles. Peter is just a bonus feature. My wife said that to me on a Friday evening, across the kitchen table I built with my own hands the summer before we got married. She had poured 2 glasses of wine. She was calm. Rehearsed. She said it the way you'd explain a phone plan upgrade, like she was doing me a favor by being transparent about the fees. My name is Charles Merritt. I'm 32 years old. I grew up in Beaumont, Texas, raised by a woman who worked double shifts so her 3 sons would never feel the shape of the hole their father left behind. I say that because it matters. It matters because the way a man is built determines what breaks him, and what doesn't. I sat across from Angela that night and I did not yell. I did not flip that table. I picked up my wine glass, set it back down without drinking and said very quietly, "I need a few days." She nodded like she thought that meant I was considering it. She reached across the table and touched my hand. I let her. But something had already closed inside me, quietly, completely, like a door with a good latch. Not slamming. Just shutting. I looked at her face, the face I had memorized over 6 years, the face I had chosen every single morning without once questioning that choice, and I felt the particular kind of stillness that lives on the other side of shock. She was still talking. I stopped hearing words. I was somewhere else entirely. I was back in my mother's kitchen, 9 years old, watching her wash a bowl of cereal my father had left half-eaten on a Tuesday morning he never came home from. And I thought, so this is how it happens. I need to tell you who Angela was before that Friday evening, because none of this makes sense without it. She grew up in San Antonio in a house where love was loud and unstable. Her parents, Marco and Sylvia, ran their marriage on intensity. Explosive fights followed by tearful reconciliations. Dramatic gestures followed by weeks of cold silence. Angela grew up believing that love was supposed to feel like a storm. That if your chest wasn't tight, if your hands weren't shaking a little, you weren't really feeling anything real. She met Peter Dawson at 22, during her junior year at UT San Antonio. He played acoustic guitar at open mic nights, drove too fast, and texted her at 2 a.m. with things that made her feel like the most chosen woman on earth. They dated 2 years. He cheated twice that she confirmed. Possibly more. She ended it at 24, heartbroken but certain she was finished with him. What nobody named for her, what she never named for herself, was that she had spent her whole childhood confusing intensity for intimacy. The racing heart, the anxiety, the desperate need to be chosen by someone unreliable, those weren't signs of deep love. They were just her parents' marriage showing up in a new body. When she met me at 24, she felt something different. Safe, steady, warm. She told her best friend Maya, "He's nothing like Peter," and she meant it as the highest compliment. She genuinely loved me. I believe that. I believed it then and I believe it now. But she had never fully unlearned the lie her childhood taught her, that calm, steady love meant something was missing. She buried that doubt and called it contentment. For years it stayed buried. Then one random Wednesday Peter found her on Instagram and sent a message that said simply, "I never stopped thinking about you." She didn't tell me. Not that day. Not for 6 weeks. I noticed something on a Tuesday. Angela had always been a private person with her phone. I respected that, never once touched it without permission in 6 years of marriage. But she left it face up on the kitchen counter while she went to shower, and it buzzed, and the name lit up the screen like something that wasn't supposed to be seen. P. Black Heart. A single letter. A black heart. I stood there holding a dish towel, staring at it and felt the floor shift slightly under my feet. I didn't open it. I set the dish towel down, walked to the stove and stirred the pasta I'd been making. When Angela came back, I handed her the phone and asked what she wanted for dinner. She smiled and said whatever I was making smelled amazing. She didn't notice my jaw. She was already typing back. I want to be honest about what those next 3 weeks were. I didn't confront her. I didn't snoop. I watched. I paid attention the way you pay attention when something in your body already knows the diagnosis and is just waiting for the doctor to confirm it. She wore perfume on Tuesdays, the days she claimed she stayed late for team meetings. She laughed differently at her phone. Not the big, open laugh she gave me. Something quieter. More private. A laugh she was trying to keep just for herself. I remember standing in the hallway one evening watching her on the couch, her face lit up by her screen, and thinking about something my mother told me once. She said, "Charles, your father wasn't a bad man. He was a man who kept a private world. And the moment a person builds a world they won't let you into, you are already alone." I didn't fully understand that when she said it. I understood it completely now. I went to bed that night before Angela came upstairs. I lay in the dark and listened to her laugh one more time from the living room. Then I closed my eyes and said nothing. 3 weeks later, she poured the wine and sat me down. She had clearly rehearsed it. I could tell by the way she paused in the right places, by the way the words came out structured and calm, with none of the jagged edges that real, unplanned honesty has. She told me she'd been in contact with Peter, an old ex from college, someone she still had feelings for. She said she loved me. She said I was her husband and her priority. She said nothing about us had changed. But she wanted to be honest. She wanted us to explore an open relationship. Just with Peter. Just for now. She used the phrase, ethical non-monogamy. She had clearly looked it up. And then she said it. The line. She leaned forward slightly, like she needed me to really receive it, and said, "You're my priority, Charles. Peter is just a bonus. Like a bonus feature. He doesn't change what we have." I have replayed that sentence more times than I can count. Not because it destroyed me, though it did, but because of the architecture of it. The way she had built a version of this that was supposed to make me feel secure. The way bonus feature was meant to minimize him, when all it actually did was tell me she had thought about him enough to find a palatable word for what he was. I sat still for 11 seconds. I know it was 11 because I counted them without meaning to, the way your mind does strange, precise things when it's absorbing something it cannot process. She thought I was considering it. She would tell Maya later that she thought I was taking it well. What I was actually doing was remembering the cereal bowl. Remembering my mother's hands washing it in silence. Remembering the promise I made to myself at 18, that I would never be the man who made a woman feel like she wasn't enough. And sitting there in the wreckage of that Friday evening, I realized with complete clarity that the promise I'd kept my entire adult life had just been handed back to me and used. I picked up my wine glass, set it down without drinking, and said, "I need a few days." I packed a bag Saturday morning while Angela was at yoga. I moved through our bedroom deliberately, not in a rage, not in tears, just with the focused calm of a man who needed to think somewhere that didn't have her perfume in the air. I took my toiletries from the bathroom shelf carefully. I lifted the framed photo of my mother from the nightstand. I left my wedding ring on the bathroom counter, not as a statement, not to be dramatic, but because I wasn't sure what it meant anymore, and I had never been the kind of man to wear something he couldn't stand fully behind. I drove to Dallas. My brother Marcus was 4 years older than me and the closest thing to a best friend I'd ever had. He'd been through his own marriage collapse years earlier. His first wife Carla had never really left someone else emotionally, even while she was with Marcus. He'd spent 2 years rebuilding after that. He was remarried now, to a woman named Tasha who he described as the first relationship where he didn't feel like he was auditioning. When I called him the night Angela made her proposal, voice flat, barely above a whisper, he didn't say a single word about being right or seeing it coming. He just said, "Come to Dallas. Tonight if you can. The guest room is made up." I drove 4 hours in near silence. Marcus was on the porch when I pulled up. He handed me a beer, sat down next to me, and we talked for 44 minutes. He cried once, briefly, in the way older brothers cry when they see their younger brother hurting, quickly, quietly, like they're embarrassed by their own tenderness. I didn't cry. Not yet. Back in Houston, Angela was calling every 2 hours. By Sunday she texted Maya. "He just left." He didn't even yell. "I don't know where he is." Maya replied, "Angela, what did you expect?" Angela stared at that response for a long time. I know this because Maya told me later. And because Maya, to her credit, never pretended that what Angela did was a misunderstanding. I came back on a Thursday evening, 5 days later. I had slept. I had eaten real food. I had sat on Marcus's back porch every morning with coffee and let the silence work on me the way silence does when you stop running from it. I looked rested, and I knew that would unsettle Angela more than if I'd come back hollowed out. She was in the kitchen when I walked in. She searched my face the way people search for weather, trying to read what was coming. I sat down at the table, folded my hands, looked at her with an expression I had never shown her in 6 years, because I had never felt it before. Not anger. Not hurt. Something quieter than both. Something that lived on the other side of a decision already made. I asked her one question. "Do you love him?" She started to say no. I could see the word forming. I held up one hand, barely, just a slight rise of my palm, and said, "Don't answer fast. Answer true." She looked down at the table for a long time. The table I had built. I watched her look at it and wondered if she was thinking about that too. Then she said, "I think I love you both. In different ways." The room was completely silent. I nodded once, slowly, the way you nod when a doctor tells you something you already knew in your body before the appointment. I stood up. Told her I'd sleep in the guest room for a few nights while I figured some things out. and I walked down the hall. Angela sat alone at that table for 40 minutes. She told her therapist later that it was the first moment she truly understood what she had done. Not the proposal. Not the 6 weeks of secret texting. But this moment, watching me walk away without slamming a single door, was when it became real for her. I heard her crying through the wall that night. I lay in the dark of the guest room, eyes open, and felt something I hadn't expected. Not satisfaction. Not relief. Just a profound, exhausting sadness for both of us. 2 days after I came back from Dallas, I did something Angela never anticipated. She had left her phone unlocked on the counter after a call, and I found Peter's number in her recent contacts. I want to be clear, I wasn't looking for a fight. I wasn't looking for ammunition. I called him because there was one question I needed answered by the one other person who would know the truth. Peter answered on the second ring. I told him who I was. I told him I had one question and I would appreciate one honest answer. I asked him, "Did Angela tell you I was on board with this arrangement?" There was a beat of silence. Then he said, "She said you two had already talked about it and that you were open to exploring it." I let that sit for a moment. Then I said, "We had not talked about it. I found out 3 weeks ago. I've been sleeping in a guest room." He was quiet for 5 full seconds. Then, "Man, I'm sorry. I didn't know that." And I believed him. Not because Peter was a good person, I didn't know enough about him to judge that, but because there was nothing in it for him to lie in that direction. He had no reason to make himself look like someone who'd been deceived unless he actually had been. I thanked him. Hung up. Sat in my car in the driveway for 23 minutes. This was the peace I hadn't fully had before. Angela hadn't just proposed something that broke my heart. She had gone around me entirely. She had sold me to Peter as a man who was already agreeable. She had built the whole architecture of what she wanted on the foundation of my imagined consent. She had made me a character in a story I never agreed to be in and given me lines I never spoke. I sat in that car and understood, with the kind of clarity that only comes from a specific and total betrayal, that this was not a mistake or a cry for help. This was a choice. Made deliberately. Over a long period of time. By someone who knew exactly what she was doing. I told Angela what Peter said that same evening. I didn't use it as a weapon. I sat across from her at the kitchen table and laid it out the way I would present a problem at work. Sequential, factual, without performance. She started crying before I finished. She said Peter had misunderstood. She said she had only implied I was open-minded, not that I had agreed. She said the distinction mattered. I looked at her for a long moment. Then I said, "The distinction is the whole thing, Angela." Then I stood up and started packing. Not frantically. I moved through our bedroom with a quiet, deliberate focus that I could tell was frightening her more than any argument would have. I folded shirts. I cleared my toiletries from the bathroom. I took the photo of my mother. Angela stood in the doorway and said, "Charles, yell at me. Tell me you hate me. Do something." I picked up my bag, turned to face her and said, "I don't hate you. I just know who you are now. And I'm not built for this." I drove back to Dallas. This time I didn't leave a return date open. That night I sat on Marcus's back porch and called my mother. I told her everything. Peter, the phone call, Angela's admission that she loved them both, the way she had described me as a priority like I was a default setting on a device. My mother listened without interrupting. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Your father didn't leave because he stopped loving us. He left because he loved himself more. And he never once admitted that, even to himself." Another pause. "Angela loves you. But she loves the feeling Peter gives her more than she loves who you actually are. And you cannot build a life with someone whose love is conditional on you being easy to have." I asked her if she thought I should have done something differently. She cut me off gently but completely. "You built that table. You remembered every flower. You wrote the letter. Charles, you were not the gap in that marriage. Don't you carry that." I filed the paperwork the next morning. Angela had told herself I would come back. I know this because Marcus knew it, because Tasha knew it, because Maya, who remained loyal to Angela even while being honest with her, eventually told me that Angela had mentally rehearsed our reconciliation conversation at least a dozen times in those first 2 weeks. She had convinced herself I was emotional, that I needed to process, that we had been through too much to end it over this. Then a process server came to the door on a Tuesday morning. She was on the phone with Peter when it happened. She opened the envelope with one hand, still holding the phone to her ear, and read the heading. Petition for divorce. She made a sound Peter later described to a mutual friend as, like the air going out of a room. She told him what the papers said. And Peter, finally uselessly honest, said, "Angela, I have to be real with you. I'm not in a place to be anyone's primary. I thought this was going to be more casual. I didn't sign up to be the reason someone's marriage ended." He wasn't cruel. He was just done. And the specific cruelty of that moment was that he said the truest thing he'd ever said to her at the exact moment it could help her least. Angela hung up. She sat on the floor of our entryway, the marble tile I had laid myself during a long weekend 2 summers before, and understood for the first time with her whole body what she had traded and what she had traded it for. The friends started going quiet shortly after. Not all at once, that would have been easier to process. It happened gradually, then completely. The group chat slowed. Plans got canceled twice in a row. Her friend Jessica, when Angela finally called her directly and asked what was going on, was quiet for a moment and then said, "Honestly? What you did to Charles." She didn't finish. She didn't need to. The verdict had been reached, quietly and without a formal meeting, by people who had watched Charles love Angela for 6 years and knew the precise weight of what she had thrown away. The divorce was finalized 6 months after I filed. It was clean as these things go. No children, no significant disputes. I signed my share of the house over to Angela without a fight. My attorney noted afterward that I was the least combative divorcing spouse he'd encountered in 12 years. I took the tools. She kept the furniture. She kept the table. I want to say something about that table. I built it the summer before our wedding in my mother's garage, over 3 weekends. I used reclaimed oak because Angela had mentioned once, months before, that she loved the look of reclaimed wood. I had remembered. I always remembered. I left it because I didn't need it. I had built it for a version of our life that no longer existed, and taking it would have meant carrying that version with me. I was done carrying things that no longer had a destination. I saw Angela at the courthouse on the day of the finalization. She came with Maya. I came with Marcus. I had expected, I think she had expected, some version of devastation on my face. What she saw instead was a charcoal gray suit she'd never seen before, a recent haircut, and the particular quiet ease of a man who had made peace with a hard decision and was no longer spending energy on grief. I saw her across the room. I nodded. I gave her a small, genuine smile, not warm in the way that meant there was still something there, but warm in the way that meant I genuinely wished her no harm and genuinely needed nothing from her. Maya told me later that Angela didn't speak for the entire drive home. She just looked out the passenger window with the expression of someone doing math they kept getting the wrong answer to. I drove back to Dallas with Marcus. We got barbecue. We talked about nothing important. It was one of the better evenings I'd had in a long time. What Angela didn't know, what she had stopped paying close enough attention to know, was what I had been quietly building at work during the last 2 years of our marriage. I had been rising inside Transcon Freight Solutions in ways that hadn't made it into our dinner conversations, because our dinner conversations had narrowed to logistics long before the end. Who was calling the plumber? What we needed from the grocery store? The weather. I had spearheaded a regional restructuring initiative that reduced operational costs by 18% across 4 Texas distribution hubs. My director, Gordon Haas, had been watching. He had offered me the regional director position, South Central Division, overseeing 6 offices including the Houston office where Angela worked in HR, 4 weeks before she made her proposal at the kitchen table. I had accepted. The announcement was scheduled for the following quarter. Nobody in the Houston office knew yet. Not Angela. Not her colleagues. Not the people who would soon have to recalibrate who I was in relation to them. 7 months after the divorce was finalized, Angela was at her desk when the company-wide email landed. I know exactly how she read it because she told her therapist, who told her to journal about it, and Maya eventually described the journal entry to me in a conversation that was equal parts painful and quietly satisfying. She almost didn't open the email. It was a standard organizational announcement. She scanned down to the name. She read the title. She looked up from her screen and stared at the wall of her cubicle, the one with the small succulent plant and the photo of a beach she'd been meaning to visit for 3 years, and felt the room tilt. Her hands were shaking slightly when she set her phone face down on the desk. The man she had called her priority, then systematically dismantled, was now her regional director. In the same company. In the same city. With a title that carried real, structural power over the world she moved through every day. Transcon held a regional leadership dinner 3 months into my directorship. Attendance was expected across all 6 offices. Angela considered calling in sick. Maya told her that calling in sick would be more conspicuous than showing up. She showed up. She was standing near the appetizer table, holding a glass of sparkling water when I walked in. I was with someone. Her name was Renee. She was warm and grounded and laughed easily and had the particular quality of a person who is comfortable in any room not because they're performing comfort but because they genuinely possess it. She touched my arm as we came through the door, not possessively, just naturally, the way people touch people they feel completely at home with. I saw Angela across the room. I gave her the same professional nod I'd been giving her in hallways for 3 months. Renee followed my glance, smiled politely in Angela's direction, and turned back to say something to Marcus, who had flown in for the event. Angela smiled back. She held that smile until we moved to another part of the room. Then she set her glass down very carefully, excused herself to the restroom, and stood in front of the mirror for 4 minutes doing nothing but breathing. She didn't cry. She had run out of the specific kind of tears that situation required. What she felt instead was something drier and more permanent. The understanding that life had not paused when she made her choices. That while she had been sitting in the wreckage watching friends quietly step back, navigating an apartment that used to be a home, waiting for texts from Peter that stopped coming entirely in month 2, I had been moving, building, becoming. She told her therapist she stood in that bathroom and thought about the table. About the reclaimed oak. About the fact that I had remembered a passing comment she made months before I ever started building it. And she thought, he was always paying attention. I just stopped noticing. 2 weeks after the company dinner, Angela submitted a formal transfer request to Transcon's Austin office. She listed professional development opportunities as her reason. Her supervisor signed off without comment. The transfer was approved in 11 days. She told herself it was a fresh start. A new city, a new office, new energy. She told Maya she was excited. Maya said, "I know," in the voice she used when she believed someone but also understood what they weren't saying. On the night before Angela's last day in Houston, she was packing the final boxes in her apartment. The one she'd moved into 8 months ago, the one that still felt like a waiting room rather than a home, when she found it. I had written her a letter 4 years into our marriage, on a Tuesday night in October, for no particular reason except that I had been watching her from the hallway and felt something I wanted to exist somewhere permanent. She had read it once and kept it. She unfolded it on the floor of her half-packed apartment and read it again. I had written about the specific morning I knew I wanted to marry her. Not when I proposed, not on the wedding day, but a random Tuesday when she was eating cereal at the kitchen counter and singing softly to a song on the radio, not knowing I was watching from the hallway. I wrote that I stood there thinking, I want to watch this person live their life for the rest of mine. I wrote, "You are the most important thing I have ever built." Angela folded the letter back into thirds. She placed it in the box she had labeled keep. She taped it shut. Then she turned off the light and sat in the dark of the empty apartment and let the full weight of it arrive. Not the anger, not the embarrassment, not the professional sting of my promotion, but the quiet, irreversible understanding that she had held something extraordinary, and had put it down to chase something that was never going to hold her back. She didn't call anyone. She didn't text anyone. She just sat there in the dark, in the kind of silence that doesn't offer comfort. The kind that simply tells you the truth. Some things once walked away from don't walk back. And I want to close this the way I opened it, not with bitterness, not with scorekeeping, but with the one thing I wish someone had told me earlier. The moment you stop auditioning to be chosen by someone who is already halfway out the door, that is the moment your real life begins. Mine did. And it was worth everything it cost me to get there.